Really sure how my character still looks like that. Maybe I should be concerned at this point, but nothing would concern me after what I've seen on the beta build this recent week here. It's not been the biggest build, I will say that, but it has had some heavy hitting changes, and mostly I'd say the thing that hits the most is the deaths do change. Now, we're going to talk about that at length, but before I do, I want to say something, and I want you guys to fully understand this, all right? There should be no confusion about this moving forward here. At no point was I ever picking the Night Fate Covenant because I thought it was just very powerful and it's what I should do in this video game is pick something that's very powerful. And it's obvious to say that now after it's been nerfed, but I think a lot of people were confused on that, or maybe they're not really sure on my position on the Covenant system, especially if you've only been watching this tank videos or maybe intermittent streams. I want it to be obvious to people that the Covenant system is going to be designed to try to be balanced for all four Covenants. And it's not just the main ability that people need to be looking at. It's pretty clear, though, that the Night Fae ability was overpowered. It was just way too easy to use. And I actually left feedback on the forums about this because I think they went from the easiest to use Covenant ability to the hardest to use Covenant ability. And that's not to say that it's super difficult and complicated to use, but it is. Like I would say like rotation breaking to use it perfectly, and it makes me think like what decisions do you actually have to make to use this well? How important is it? So, but yeah, one more time, I would encourage nobody, 0 people, to just pick the strongest Covenant. Literally, and not even like top raters. I would, but I mean, you never know how easy it's going to be to change it in the future. So maybe it won't matter for long, but pick the Covenant that excites you, that makes you feel like, oh, that's where I want to spend time. That's what I want to do. For me, that's Night Fae, and it's not just because the blue D&D, ironically, is a big part of why I picked that Covenant. I love the way that looks. It is so freaking cool looking, and the other big thing of it is the actual Night Fae blink or whatever. That is really, really, really nice for a Blood DK. Somebody who's kind of historically struggled with the lack of mobility on the spec. It's not necessarily my favorite thing about any spec, but you don't see me talking about all the negatives all the time, right? So you could never tell. I definitely like the fact that I can be a lot more mobile now. And they also have a really, really cool the middle soulbind. We'll end it there, but the middle soulbind, I really like some of the stuff going on there. So for me, it's like a 95% fit. And even after the change to Death's Due, I'm still pretty satisfied. But let's get to the actual changes. But yeah, just wanted to make it clear that, I'll be picking that Covenant. And I'm not guaranteed that I'm picking it, nothing like that. But I'll be picking that Covenant for more reasons than the single ability that everybody's talking about here. And I think you should do the same thing. You should pick one that you like. Start to finish, you like the mount, you like the armor, you like all the story, you like the zone, you like the everything. Try to find one that you can do that with. So anyway, let's read what Blizzard has to say. It's not just Death's Due that changed, but we'll read the rest when we get there. So in this week's Shadowland build, Death's Due has been updated, and its buffs and debuffs are no longer applied each time it deals damage. That's literally all they had to do, and it would have been substantially nerfed, but that's not all they did. Now your Heart Strike. Now this also applies to other specs, so it is a bit unfair what I'm going to say about Death's Due here because I'm coming from only Blood DK perspective, and frankly, I think this would make it a lot different for the other specs. But anyway, your Heart Strike, Scourge Strike, and Obliterate now apply Death's Due to the target, reducing the damage they deal to you and increasing your strength by the same amount. The duration of the buff has been reduced, and the maximum amount of stacks has been reduced. To 8, by the way. So that's, like it was 15 to 8. So that's what, like, I don't know the percentage, but it's not quite half. In addition to these changes, Death's Due has a unique bonus for Frost that allows their Obliterate to hit one additional target while they stay within Death's Due. These changes to Death's Due are aimed at making it a little more rotation impactful, rather than just a passive bonus when casting it, while making it more balanced against the other Covenant choices. So it does say, like, a little more rotation impactful is the words that were used by whoever posted this, probably Sigma or something. But they really flipped it. I mean, this is kind of crazy. First of all, the balance against other Covenant choices, like, I don't know where this puts it. I've read a lot, actually. This isn't normally something I would do, but I was actively seeking other people's opinions on this topic. So I've been all around the globe trying to listen to people talk about this. Mostly, I hear a lot of people talking about it for DPS, so it's difficult to be sure. But from what I could tell, most people think it is still very powerful. Like, it's not that much weaker. And I'm actually kind of surprised to hear that. I think maybe these people are talking about it from a raid perspective, where there's only a single target most times, and it's just like really easy to keep the buff up. In fact, this is what I heard was said. They said it's actually extremely easy to keep the buff up 100% of the time. You just have to have a timer for. This is something I don't have, to be fair, so this would help a lot. But basically, you just have a timer for D&D. There's actually a weak ore that has been being made, where it shows like the minimum amount of time that you would need to hard strike before Death's Decay or whatever Death's Due ends, and then you would extend the buff so long that even if you didn't put D&D down at the maximum moment, it would be easy. Now that's all well and good, but we're talking about obviously like not 5-mans. They're like not realistic scenarios, and that's unfortunately been a big problem with me and like, you know, other communities in general, like people who try to like more like mathematically determine strengths and weaknesses. It's like that's just not a realistic scenario. You know what I mean? You have to be like perfectly stood still. There has to be like, you know, the conditions have to be ideal. You have to always make sure you have this. So the big problem for me with this ability, first of all, I'm just going to say at a base level, it's just way less fun. Now, it's pretty obvious to say that because it was way overpowered, and being overpowered is fun, right? We've done this now with a bunch of tanks. Let's put it this way. It is oftentimes more fun to be overpowered. That I do recognize was definitely overpowered, and I think it's because of how passive it was. So to hear them say that and acknowledge that, that's good. But I think all they needed to do was just this, literally, just this. This is fine. This would have been fine. If it was still 15% and it, you know, only, you know, changed with Heart Strike or whatever and didn't get nerfed and nothing else, then it would be good. I think it would be perfect. But I guess even at 8%, it's still really powerful. So, like I said, I don't care about that at all. That's not why I would pick it, but maybe you do. You'll probably want to go to somebody else for that info, but for me, I definitely feel like it's a lot weaker. It didn't really feel like it impacted my character. A lot of people came into the stream yesterday and they were like, how do you feel after the changes?" And I'm like, just didn't change shit. Like, I mean, obviously, like 15% free DR. The thing about that in 5-mans, though, even though it was really, 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 really overpowered for 5-mans, because Death and Decay could hit all the targets. I keep wanting to say Deaths and Decay because Deaths do. Anyway, it was really overpowered in 5-mans, but it just didn't last long enough to get like going. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times, by the time I'd get to 15%, the pack would be dead. So I wouldn't need to, you know, like most of the mobs would be dead or something already. One other thing I want to bring up before I forget. I don't know if that's new with this build, but we tested, there's another huge change here. We tested the situation we were talking about months ago about being able to take a mob, control undead, a mob, and then sacrifice it. At the time, you could take any undead mob in a dungeon, sacrifice it, and it would give count. You cannot do any of that anymore. Well, you could still take it, barely. You could take the mobs that you want, but you can't have an actual pet out. And having an actual pet out, I think, is more important because it's basically like, yeah, I mean, it's a 2-minute CD that's basically like a big heal. Like if you can't see because of the webcam, but yeah, long story short, Sacrificial Pact has been substantially important for me as a Death Knight. So not having a pet out, you know, I don't know. It's a bit odd. But the thing is, if I use the pet CD first and then take the pet, I could have both. So there might still be a bug here. I'm not really sure what to think about this, but yeah, breaking news kind of. You can no longer mind control and automatically one-shot a mob. So, yeah, I mean, that's a huge nerf. I don't know, like, it was never supposed to be that way, I'm sure, but it's been like, again, look back, I would love somebody to tell me when we first discovered that. I think that's like alpha build week 2 or something, honestly. I think, or maybe week 3. The thing is, we couldn't get I think Sacrificial Pact is like level 57 or something like that. So we couldn't get that until they gave us Revendreth, which I don't think was early enough. But it was early, but not that early. But we knew this for months. Like, I'm talking about most of the summer. It was like this. And it just gets fixed now. So those are the kind of things that do get a little scary and a little in the weeds, so you never know. But I just wanted to bring that up before I forgot. I knew I was going to forget. But yeah, so the whole Death's Due situation. So what my thought on it is that even if it is numerically still very strong, people are saying it's still the best Covenant, and that it doesn't really change much. You just have to time your heart strikes, and that's good. First of all, like, I think that's like severely oversimplifying the situation. Even if you're talking about on like a single target, you still like you want to stack it up as fast as possible, don't you? So like you don't have to just time hard strike. It's not like it's just a CD. It has to be, the runes have to line up for you to be able to do that. So that means you have to not need, like, or you basically, you either don't need runic power or you don't need death strikes, one of the two, within, you know, the last probably like 7 seconds of Death's Due. And you don't need to refresh Bone Shield. So those things maybe happen a lot in raids, but in 5-mans, it's not realistic at all. So like then things start to wonder. I start to wonder, like, when do you need to prioritize which of these things, right? So like they gave us Ossuary baseline, which I'm sure we talked about in a previous video. And that's almost ironic now, because if Ossuary's baseline, then, you know, more people are going to start, not like anybody wasn't taking it, I guess, but yeah, some percentage more of people are going to start caring more about having a minimum amount of Bone Shield above, you know, 5 or whatever it is. So like if you're trying to maintain that in a large AoE pack and you're trying to maximize Death's Due, you got to make a decision here. You can't do all of this. You know what I mean? So what's better? Is it having Ossuary like above, you know, so many stacks of Bone Shield? Is that more important than having Death's Due 100% uptime? What about having any Bone Shield? Like, I don't know, how powerful can this be looked at? Like, if you can get, if there's like 10 mobs and you could somehow get that 8% on all 10 of them, is that a bigger damage reduction than having Bone Shield up? I don't know. Probably not, but you never know. So these are the things that you have to start to think about here. And I think it's not necessarily, that's not something that a Covenant ability should be making us think about, is my point. Like, look at all 3 other Covenants. Elysian, or whatever the first one's called, literally you just press it and it does nothing. You know what I mean? Like, it's as basic as it gets. And talking about passive bonus, like, well, that's because you decided a bad ability. I don't know what to tell you. You made a bad ability. This is a stupid ability for a Covenant. It looks freaking awesome, and I'm glad they made it, but you should not be making a Covenant ability alter a passive. You know what I mean? They did the same thing with Warrior, and it's just dumb. It doesn't make any sense. This is not what anybody wanted. They wanted an active ability, so you kind of put yourself in this position, and now that you're trying to change it, like 3 weeks left, basically, a little frustrating. I don't like, a bit from what I've resigned to just use it as the best I can. I'm not going to worry about it. If I get even 1 or 2% of the, you know, damage reduction up on even 50% of the mobs I'm fighting, I'll be satisfied with that. That's the best I was really able to do in the 5-man testing we did. So the reason it's complicated is because, first of all, like, hard strike only hits so many targets, right? Like, if you have 10 targets in your D&D before, all 10 of them were going to be doing less damage to you. That's ridiculous. That's why it was so overpowered. You didn't have to work at all, okay? But now it's like impossible. You're not going to get all 10 of those targets to be debuffed at the same rate. It's just not possible. You don't control what your hard strike hits. So there's a chance, like, you have to actually physically target all 10 of those just to get any, you know, I don't actually know how it selects it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe there's some kind of smart selection with hard strike, but I don't know. I have no idea how that works. All I know is it's going to be a lot harder to get many targets in your D&D debuffed the same rate. But on the bright side, it means it's going to be really, really easy to keep the strength buff up, because you're hitting so many things that it's just going really quick. So it's actually easier. I'd say this, like, if it was 15%, this would probably be a buff, because the strength buff would get, like, stacked up quicker. You know what I mean? Like, 1 hard strike gives you a bunch of strength buffs. So It's interesting. I just don't know how important the strength buff is compared to the actual damage reduction. You'd hope that, even though strength is such a good versatile stat for Blood DK, you'd hope that just flat damage reduction is going to be more important than anything else the kit provides. And again, don't forget, this is also considered for magic. You know what I mean? So it's still a very powerful concept, and it's going to be very useful in many scenarios where strength is effectively only parry or whatever, the bone shield armor coefficient thing. So, but hey, I don't know. For me, it was just a lot less fun. And like I said, it's pretty much, it's rotation breaking. If you're in a big group, like if you're fighting like 5 or 7 mobs or something like that, having to like try to get them all hit or trying, basically the big issue I have is it's very difficult to keep up bone shield. It's very difficult to use rune tap at all. Like rune tap has been completely pushed to the side now. I don't know how the hell you would use rune tap, death dews, buffs, and bone shield. You can't use all 3. There's just not enough. You don't have enough haste for that. You'd have to have like 80% haste for that to be possible. And that is one thing that I'll close on here, is that haste is going to make this really good. Like, this is actually going to get better every time we get more gear. And I don't know necessarily how good it's going to get, especially if there's some kind of like scaling or what do you call it, like a cap on secondary stats. Now you can't get, like, it's diminishing returns over 25% or something. I don't know exactly how that works. That's not my wheelhouse, but it does exist, and I'm actually already able to get into like the 20% haste with the legendary, 10% every time I throw down Death's Due. It's really looking like an amazing legendary, and that felt really good. So that plus blood tap. So I took blood tap. People are saying that Relish in Blood is better. The 10 runic power, I'm not sure I agree with. The heal is pitiful. I did a couple dungeons with it. It's absolutely pitiful. But blood tap is not necessarily very good overall, but I feel like it's actually extremely good for Death's Due, because being able to get those extra hard strikes in is just so much more valuable. It's kind of went from like, oh, well, what am I going to use? Blood tap is like very passive. Now it's like, oh no, but if I can use it inside of a Death's Due, then it's going to be really good. So I took that, and then I also took the legendary Pheromones legendary, 10% haste while you are inside your death and decay, and enemies damaged have a chance to cower in place for 3 seconds. So this is extremely good legendary regardless. We always knew it was going to be for 5-mans, but now extra 10% haste, it certainly turns Death's Due around, makes it a lot easier to enjoy using. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. There's some changes to Demon Hunter stuff and more things that we'll read. Let's read this too. It's Demon Hunter tank stuff. The hunt had recently been redesigned to have a lower cooldown dot application to 5 targets, and the removal of the teleport and fury generation bonus. We've since tuned the ability to be more competitive with Sinful Brand. So I don't know what they're talking about. Recently been redesigned to have a lower cooldown dot application of 5 targets. That means like when you charge through them, I guess that's what they mean, right? Yeah, up to 5 enemies in your path. I don't know what they mean by tune the ability to be more competitive with Sinful Brand, because then they just buffed Sinful Brand. But also, Elysian Decree is significant. Let's take a look at the actual Demon Hunter stuff, because this would be better viewed here. First of all, they buffed Havoc. I don't know. Not a Havoc player, but I should also mention that they're basically redesigning Fodder to the Flame. While we like the thematic texture of Fodder to the Flame, we've observed your feedback about the way it ties a very mobile class to a specific area. We think this could be an interesting trade-off, but the benefits of standing in the pool of demon blood need to be compelling. Stay tuned as we iterate on this idea further. Oh, cool, yeah. So within the next 4 weeks before launch, hopefully. I don't know. It's kind of crazy how many Covenant abilities are changing, but I feel like we're losing pre-patch because of Covenants. And I'm not necessarily upset about that, but I'm kind of upset about that because I really, really, really had a lot to do. I really wanted to do a lot in the pre-patch, and now it's looking like, yeah, anyway. But so let's take a look at this real quick, because this is pretty crazy. So Elysian Decree was buffed from 132% attack power to 350% attack power. That's over double. I mean, well over double. That's a huge freaking buff. And if you saw in the beginning when we were testing a lot of, all we had was the Kyrian Covenant, Elysian Decree was actually the hardest hitting Covenant ability by a mile. But that was before they buffed and then subsequently unbuffed Spear of Bastion. But yeah, Unleashing Decree is a short CD, guys, and it's also affected by the sigil thingy, whatever that I don't know. There's like a talent that makes the sigils have a lower CD or something like that. So really, 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 that's a very interesting synergy there. And it does also shatter up to 3 lesser soul fragments, which isn't the biggest deal. It's certainly not anywhere near as powerful as the kind of auxiliary thing from Sinful Brand, but it's actually really interesting. Like there's some credibility here in this spell. The thing about the Hunt is they also buff that substantially. First of all, charge to your enemy, striking them by, like, I mean, again, double, right? Nature damage, rooting them in place for 1.5 seconds and inflicting a lot of attack power over 6 seconds up to 5 enemies in your path. So I guess that was this build that they changed it to not any enemies. And then maybe that's why they buffed it. It's going to be way better, maybe like smaller target packs, but very interesting ability. It's just the healing. Like, I don't know. Last time I tested this. Oh, and then they also nerfed it. Oh my god. Yeah, they also nerfed it by 30 seconds. Wow. Okay. I just don't think this ability competes. Like I don't know why they would nerf that. Unless I missed something when I was testing it. It did very, very, very little healing. Like the healing was not needed. And I don't know if they even need any more healing, to be honest. Like, I don't know. But maybe it could be good. I think the big thing is the damage it does to compete with Sinful Brand. But it seems like even Blizzard is missing the point of Sinful. I don't necessarily understand why they buffed Sinful Brand too. Like they seemingly buffed it. I'm not really sure because there's only the one Sinful Brand. I still can't figure out exactly what I'm looking at here. But this happens a lot where these ability, like you can tell there's a bunch of the hunts buffed. And that is because they're not all the same, even though they read the same. One of them is from like when you play through as a paladin or whatever, a demon hunter. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but when you're not max level and you haven't chosen your covenant, you get the hunt, okay, as like while you're leveling through Ardenweald. And then there's the hunt that you pick from the covenant. And then there's the hunt that you get like borrowed when you're testing the covenant at max level. So like there's a bunch of different hunts. I don't know how it works. You know what I'm saying? That's a weird word to say out loud a bunch. But anyway, so yeah, I don't really like the topic about Sinful Brand has always been that this is just too intangibly powerful. Even if it did 0 damage, reducing the attack speed and casting speed of mobs around you is actually more important than, like, I mean, it's just better. You know what I mean? That's something that is just an intangible thing that could actually have a huge impact on a dungeon. It's going to be hard to measure. Certainly, it's going to be harder to measure than Elysian Decree and the Hunt too, I'd imagine. But it's, if you could measure it, it's like intangible. It's something that should always be looked at as very powerful. Now, there's also a thing about monks. I'm 90% sure this is only in relationship to Windwalker, but I think I just want to check one. Oh, yeah, there's also some Druid stuff. One thing I will say is that there's no actual, another groundbreaking Druid change. This time for balance. Maybe they meant to do that for Feral, but anyway, these legendaries have been like buffed or changed, I guess, nerfed in some cases. Most cases, but yeah, Wild Growth has a 50% chance to cause your next rejuve or regrowth to apply to 3 additional allies. That's interesting, legendary. And I know right now it looks like you can only wear one legendary anyway, but I just can't get over the fact that in Legion I wanted a non-bear legendary the whole expansion. So you never know. Maybe someday that's gonna have some use as a guardian druid, in a raid or something like that. You're mostly off tanking or something, you might be able to get some big healing out, but who knows. Anyway, so let's just say monk real quick. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is all just basically, it doesn't look like there's anything specific for Brewmaster. So, and then Paladin, I don't think this increases the damage. Yeah, this isn't actually anything to talk about here, but it stacks up now instead. So we actually talked about this last week, I think, because that somebody actually said it didn't do this. That's very interesting. The commenter said it didn't work for Prot. It did not increase the damage of their next Holy Power Spender. So maybe that's why, because it was bugged the whole time and they were changing it. But yeah, now it increases holy damage done by 2% for 8 seconds, stacking 3 times. So that's kind of... Nah, I don't... Stacking 3 times? How do you even get 3 Hammers of Wrath off within that period of time? So I don't know. But... yeah, I don't... no real changes. So anyway, that's pretty much everything. Some big changes to Shaman. A lot of classes did get some big changes, but there's no Warrior changes, I don't believe, right? It's kind of crazy, man. Warrior has stayed firm for a long time now. Very, very, very little change. And I don't know what to think about Warrior. We did play Warrior this week. If you watched that stream, I apologize. I just don't like Warrior, and I was already in a bad mood because of that. But yeah, in general, the Death Stew thing. What do you guys? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You know, people are saying that it's not that big of a nerf. It's not really going to change anything. First of all, it's still the strongest covenant as well. Which I'm not necessarily, I don't really care about one way or the other. If I was going to pick it, I'm going to pick it. But it's just so much harder to use well, and I just don't know how important it is to use it well, that I've kind of had to just resign from using it well, because it's like, listen, if I'm going to use it well, it's going to be like, I'm going to basically have to avoid using Bone Shield at all improperly and never use Rune Tap, really. So I don't think that's good.